pushed aside and told you don't have the power to fight back. Get ready, because this is a masterclass in revenge. The storm outside roared against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. But inside, the real tempest was tearing Ava Sinclair's life apart. You mean the model you've been seeing behind my back? Ethan didn't even blink. I can't have a wife who hides from the spotlight. That was his version of the truth. To him, she was just the soft-spoken woman who'd been working at an independent design studio when they met. And now he was throwing her away like yesterday's press release. I'm pregnant, Ethan. This is your child. You'll have enough. Enough. The word landed like a slap. Not love, not commitment, not even respect, just enough. The man who had once promised to protect her now treated her like an inconvenience. He reached for his coat. The driver will take you to your apartment, the one in Brooklyn. You'll be more comfortable there. That's a storage unit you bought to hide me from your friends. He was already at the door. Ava Sinclair, though Ethan knew her as Ava James, was 29 years old, a talented interior designer with an eye for both elegance and functionality. Or at least, that's the version of her life Ethan had been allowed to see. The real Ava had been born into the Sinclair dynasty. The sole heiress to Sinclair Technologies, a multinational giant that developed AI systems, cybersecurity solutions, and cutting-edge software used by governments and Fortune 500 companies. But after her mother's death, Ava had begged her father for space. She never expected that the man she'd fall for would one day humiliate her in the most public way possible. The Cross penthouse was a sleek testament to Ethan's ambitions, a glass and steel fortress towering above Manhattan. Every corner was meticulously curated to project wealth and dominance. On the opposite page was a photo of him and Sienna at a charity gala just 3 nights ago, her glittering gown hugging a body that screamed confidence and youth. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and smiled, an expression Ava realized she hadn't seen directed at her in months. Sienna's downstairs, he said without shame. I'll have the papers sent to you tomorrow. Ava's voice rose, and she didn't care if the neighbors heard. Ethan's gaze was flat. Investors don't want scandal. We'll make it look amicable. She let out a bitter laugh. Stability? You're creating the scandal. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as though he were offering her a final piece of advice. Ava, you don't have the power to fight me. Not anger, not grief, something colder, sharper. Power. But she said nothing. Not yet. When Ethan left, the silence wrapped around her like armor. Somewhere out there, behind tinted glass and locked gates, was the Sinclair estate. She hadn't stepped foot in it for nearly 5 years, but she still had the key. She pulled out her phone and scrolled past Ethan's number to the one she had kept hidden, even from herself, labeled simply Uncle R. Her mother's younger brother, Richard Sinclair, was the current CEO of Sinclair Technologies and a man who never forgot a slight against his family. She took a deep breath, pressed dial, and when his familiar voice answered with, "Ava, is everything all right?" she smiled for the first time that night. "Uncle R," she said, her voice steady. "It's time to come home. And it's time Ethan Cross learns who he just divorced." The city outside hummed with its usual chaos, but in her head, there was only stillness. She had spent the night making lists, revisiting memories she'd buried, and replaying Ethan's words like a broken record. The call to Uncle Richard had been brief. He hadn't asked for details. Bare brick walls, mismatched furniture she'd found at flea markets, shelves lined with books and design sketches. She had built it herself, piece by piece, to be ordinary, to be free from the expectations that came with the Sinclair name. It was about the symbolism. At the dresser, her hand hesitated over a framed photo of her and Ethan from their first year together, smiling on a beach in Santorini, his arms wrapped around her. She dropped it face down and left it there. "Miss Sinclair," he said, opening the door. It had been years since anyone had addressed her by her true name in public. Her mother in the garden, the echo of her father's laughter in the marble halls, her teenage rebellion against endless charity events and investor dinners. Uncle Richard waited at the base of the stairs, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. "You've lost weight," he said, frowning. "And you're 6 months." His frown deepened, and his voice took on that clipped tone that had terrified CEOs in boardrooms across 3 continents. "Then tell me everything." Richard listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "He thinks you're powerless," Richard said. "That's good. Let him think that a little longer." A strategic pause. "We don't start with revenge. Control of the narrative," he replied. "We need to make sure you become the story, on our terms." "You won't get sympathy," Richard said. "You'll get respect." That afternoon, Ava's old phone was replaced with a new one, loaded with encrypted apps and contacts she hadn't spoken to in years, board members, legal advisors, PR strategists. Gone were the casual dresses and worn cardigans, replaced by sleek silhouettes in bold, commanding colors. Ava stood before a full-length mirror in a fitted black dress and pearl earrings, her hair swept into a low chignon. She looked like the daughter of Elizabeth Sinclair. Her uncle's assistant entered with a tablet. "There's a tech summit in 2 days. If you attend publicly, it will set off questions." Across the city, Ethan was basking in the attention. Sienna laughed at his jokes during a televised interview, her hand resting lightly on his arm as the host gushed about their chemistry. Behind the scenes, Ethan's team was working overtime to spin the divorce as a mutual decision, but cracks were forming. Investors had begun whispering about his judgment, concerned that personal drama could affect the company's image. Ethan brushed it off. He was sure of it. This wasn't just about her pride or revenge. It was about securing a future for her child, one that wasn't tainted by Ethan's arrogance. "Strength isn't loud, Ava. It's steady." Her phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Be in the boardroom at 9 a.m. tomorrow." The next morning, she stepped into the Sinclair Technologies boardroom for the first time in years. "It's yours now, Ava. Effective immediately." Ava had sat in many boardrooms before, but never at the head of this table. The Sinclair Technologies boardroom was an empire in itself. A massive oval of polished walnut surrounded by windows that offered a panoramic view of the skyline. On the walls, framed patents and innovation awards told the story of a dynasty that had changed the world. She took her seat. The quiet in the room was thick, every board member watching her as though they just witnessed a seismic shift. A ripple of murmurs passed around the table. Ava folded her hands on the table. "Thank you, Uncle Richard, and thank you to the board for trusting me with what my mother built." Her voice was steady, though her heart was pounding. "I left because I needed to understand who I was without this name. Now I know, and I'm here because there's work to be done." "Before we move on," Ava said, scanning the room, "I want a full report on all current partnerships, especially those involving cross dynamics." That got their attention. By lunch, Ava had learned the basics. Richard smirked when she pointed it out. "Not yet. We let him build. Let him spend millions marketing the product. Then we call in our rights." Richard laughed softly. Meanwhile, in Ethan's world, he was riding high on his latest press feature, tech's new power couple, Ethan Kross and Sienna Vale. It was the first subtle tremor of the earthquake Ava was planning. 2 days later, Ava made her first public appearance in over a year at the annual International Tech Summit. Cameras flashed as she stepped out of the black Bentley, the simple elegance of her navy sheath dress making as much of a statement as the discreet diamond earrings she wore. Journalists swarmed. "Miss Sinclair, are you here to announce a new partnership? Why now, after so much time away from the public eye? Is it true you're pregnant?" Ava smiled, offering no comment beyond, "I'm here for the future." Inside, she worked the room with calculated precision. Every handshake was photographed, every conversation noted. By the time she reached the Sinclair Technologies booth, social media was already ablaze with photos and headlines. "Ava Sinclair, Heiress, returns to the game." "Who's Ava Sinclair?" she asked casually. Ethan froze. "No one you need to worry about." But his stomach tightened. He knew the name. He'd never connected it to the quiet, self-contained woman he'd married. "She looks like she means business," Sienna said, tapping the screen. Ethan's jaw clenched. Coincidence? Back at the Sinclair estate, Ava sat in her study, reviewing documents that outlined every weak point in Ethan's business. Her legal team was already drafting contingency plans for seizing patent rights if necessary. It wasn't just about hitting him financially. In his world, image was currency, and she was about to bankrupt him in both. Ava took a sip. "I want him to feel the walls closing in before they actually do." A week later, Ethan's CFO walked into his office looking grim. "The AI partner you signed with, their controlling shareholder, has called for a renegotiation. And that shareholder is Sinclair Technologies." Ethan's blood ran cold. Sinclair. It hit him like a punch. The pieces clicked into place. The last name, her sudden public reappearance, the calculated calm she'd shown when he'd left her. "She played me," he muttered, more to himself than to the CFO. That night, Ethan called Ava. He tried again. He sent a short text. In the quiet of her study, Ava read the message and set her phone aside. Let him sweat. She wasn't ready to speak to him until the boardroom and the cameras were watching. It was for a special joint industry announcement to be held at the Grand Manhattan Hotel. At the bottom, in elegant script, was a single line, "Hosted by Ava Sinclair, Chairwoman." The Grand Manhattan Hotel had hosted presidents, royal weddings, and billion-dollar merger signings, but that morning, it belonged to Ava Sinclair. Backstage, Ava reviewed her notes, though she knew the speech by heart. This wasn't just an industry announcement. This was the first public move in her calculated dismantling of Ethan's empire. The timing, the optics, the stakes, everything had been engineered to ensure maximum impact. Richard leaned in. "Remember, we're not here to humiliate him. We're here to shift the market's confidence. The market will get the message, and so will he." His navy suit was immaculate, his cufflinks catching the light. Sienna's white silk dress was cut to perfection. Cameras swiveled instantly, reporters calling out questions about their power couple status. The MC, a well-known business journalist, stepped to the podium. "Today marks a strategic partnership between Sinclair Technologies and," he paused for effect, "Cross Dynamics." A buzz rippled through the audience. Ethan had clearly expected to control the narrative, but Ava had forced him onto her stage, under her rules. She took her place at the podium beside Ethan, their proximity a picture-perfect photo op for everyone but him. "Today, we're expanding that legacy with a joint venture that will revolutionize predictive analytics." She turned slightly toward Ethan, her smile poised. Under the umbrella was corporate language for who held the power. Ethan's jaw tightened. A hand shot up from the audience. It belonged to a prominent venture capitalist known for backing aggressive tech plays. "Miss Sinclair, could you clarify? Will Sinclair Technologies hold controlling interest in this partnership?" "Yes," Ava said smoothly. Gasps and murmurs filled the ballroom. As Ava fielded more questions, Sienna whispered something to Ethan, loud enough for a few nearby reporters to hear. "I thought you said you had full control." The words spread like wildfire among the press, their pens scribbling furiously. Ava caught it and tucked it away for later. Sinclair Technologies dominates new partnership. Stock tickers reflected the shift. Cross Dynamics dipped by nearly 3%. "You blindsided me," he pressed. You could have negotiated. I did, she cut in, turning to face him. You just weren't invited to the table. His eyes narrowed. This isn't over. She smiled faintly. No, Ethan. It's just beginning. That evening, Ava sat in her study, watching the replay of the conference on a muted screen. Richard entered with a folder. Cross Dynamics has 2 major supply contracts expiring next quarter. Perfect. We'll renegotiate terms in our favor. At his penthouse, Ethan was on the phone with his legal team. Find me a way to challenge their majority control. Anything. They've had these patents for years. You walked straight into this one. Ethan ended the call and poured himself a drink. And now she was using the one arena he couldn't dominate with charm or press photos, the boardroom. Today, it felt like enemy territory. Good morning. I know there's been chatter after the Sinclair announcement, but let me assure you, our partnership is strong and our leadership is focused on growth. A few polite nods. No applause. Ethan, why were shareholders not informed that Sinclair Technologies held majority control over the predictive analytics project before the deal was signed? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because that detail doesn't affect our ability to execute. The murmurs around the table grew louder. As the questions piled on, Ethan realized the unspoken truth. Ava wasn't in the room physically, but her presence was everywhere. Mr. Cross, another shareholder asked, has Ms. Sinclair expressed any intent to acquire a larger stake in Cross Dynamics? Ethan kept his tone even. Not to me. Which was true, but the truth didn't matter when the market believed otherwise. Halfway through the meeting, the double doors at the back of the room opened. A woman in a tailored charcoal suit stepped inside, her heels silent against the carpet. It was Ava. Ethan's pulse spiked. Sinclair Technologies had acquired a 12% stake in Cross Dynamics over the past quarter through a series of shell companies. The impact was immediate. Chairs shifted. Side conversations erupted. Ethan's CFO looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. This isn't a takeover, Ava said, her tone almost gentle. It's a partnership. But I believe partnerships work best when there's transparency and capable leadership. The implication landed like a sledgehammer. The vote of confidence was called sooner than expected. The numbers were close, but he survived, barely. When the meeting adjourned, Ethan stalked toward Ava in the hallway. No, she said. I came here to warn them. Warn them about what? He demanded. She smiled faintly. That night, Ethan called in favors. He arranged an exclusive interview with a major business network, framing the Sinclair stake as a friendly collaboration and downplaying rumors of conflict. Cross Dynamics is strong, he told the cameras. And I have no doubt our partnership with Sinclair will drive unprecedented innovation. But as soon as the segment aired, Ava's PR team released a statement of their own. Sinclair Technologies is committed to supporting Cross Dynamics growth under leadership that prioritizes transparency and strategic foresight. Not to confront him, just to remind people that I'm watching. Richard smirked. You're making him fight shadows. Sienna wasn't used to being ignored, but lately, Ethan was distracted, tense, and often on the phone late into the night. The lavish dates slowed, replaced by strategy meetings and emergency calls. Sienna folded her arms. Managing or losing? Ava had skipped it for years. This time, her name was at the top of the host list. Ethan and Sienna were both invited, though Ava doubted they'd dare decline. Richard caught her eye as they reviewed the seating chart. Ava's smile was slow and deliberate. I'm building a theater. On the night of the gala, the red carpet was a blaze of flashbulbs. Ava stepped out of the Bentley in a sweeping black gown, diamonds catching the light like shards of ice. Cameras roared her name, and at the far end of the carpet, she saw Ethan and Sienna arrive right as the press shouted, "Ava, over here with them for a photo." The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel shimmered under chandeliers the size of small cars. A 40-foot digital display cycled through images of Sinclair-funded project schools, hospitals, tech incubators, but no one was looking at the screen. She moved through the crowd with the grace of someone born to command it. Her black silk gown flowed like liquid, and the deep V of the neckline was offset by the perfect drape of a diamond necklace. Every time the cameras flashed, Ethan saw it. She was a presence, magnetic and untouchable. Sienna clung to his arm as they stepped into the room, her silver dress catching the light. It didn't take long for them to cross paths. Ava was speaking with the mayor when Ethan approached, Sienna in tow. "Madam Chairwoman," Ethan said with a practiced smile. "Impressive turnout." Ava's gaze flicked to him, cool and unreadable. Sienna forced a laugh. The mayor's eyebrows rose. Ava's smile never faltered. "Education, healthcare, and innovation," she said smoothly. "Things that leave a lasting impact, unlike a seasonal runway show." It was deliberate. Ava stepped to the podium, her voice carrying easily through the hall. She spoke about the Foundation's projects, the lives changed, the importance of innovation not just in business but in compassion. "Partnerships," she said, "are built on trust, transparency, and mutual respect. Without those, even the most promising ventures can falter. I've learned that the hard way, but I've also learned how to rebuild stronger than before." It wasn't overt, but it didn't need to be. Cameras zoomed in on Ethan's face. As applause filled the room, Sienna leaned toward Ethan. "You didn't tell me she was this good." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for the venture capitalist beside her to hear. "She's rattled him in front of donors." After dinner, guests wandered to the silent auction tables, filled with luxury vacations, art pieces, and rare wines. Ava had donated a week-long retreat at the Sinclair estate in Provence, complete with private jet transportation. Ethan's competitive streak flared when he saw it. He scribbled his bid, determined to win at least one headline-worthy prize tonight. An hour later, the final bids were revealed. The band struck up a slow jazz number, and couples began to fill the dance floor. Ethan, watching from the edge, could feel the narrative slipping. Instead, the evening belonged to Ava. Sienna tugged at his sleeve. "Dance with me," she whispered, desperation edging her voice. As the night drew to a close, Ava took the microphone once more to thank the guests. Then, with a glance toward Ethan, she added, "And in the coming months, Sinclair Technologies will unveil projects that redefine what's possible when leadership is aligned with purpose." The message was clear: bigger moves were coming. In the green room after the gala, Richard handed Ava a glass of water. "You just owned the room." "That was the point," she said, removing her earrings. Her phone buzzed. Ava's smile was slow and deliberate. "It's starting." The envelope sat on Ava's desk like a loaded weapon. 3 Cross Dynamics board members, men who had once stood firmly in Ethan's corner, were now offering her a path to controlling his company outright. Richard read the proposal twice, then looked up at her. Ava traced a finger along the embossed Sinclair letterhead she'd been using for recent communications. "If they're coming to me, it means he's losing more than just market confidence." Across the city, Ethan was in damage control mode. Their dinners had turned into silent meals. The lavish trips he'd once promised were postponed. Her patience was wearing thin. One evening she confronted him. "Ethan, you're losing this." "I'm managing it." "Ava's everywhere in the news, at events, in your contracts. She's making you look like a fool." At the Sinclair estate, Ava gathered her inner circle: Richard, her PR head, her chief legal counsel, and a representative from their mergers and acquisitions team. The acquisition proposal was projected onto the wall. "I want him to choose to give it up." She leaned back in her chair. The next week, Sinclair Technologies announced a new research initiative in predictive AI, one that directly competed with Ethan's prized project. Stock prices wavered. Ethan slammed his pen on the desk. Who? At a dinner with friends, she overheard someone whisper, she traded the wrong stock. That night, she asked Ethan point-blank, if she takes your company, what happens to us? He stared at her for a moment before answering, she won't take it. But his voice lacked conviction. She answered, and to her surprise, it was Sienna. I'm not calling to be your friend, Sienna said without preamble. Ava kept her voice neutral. And because you're going to win anyway. By the end of the week, those firms had publicly declared their support for Sinclair's vision for industry innovation, effectively cutting off Ethan's lifeline before he could grab it. Ava allowed herself a small smile. When Ethan heard the news, he went quiet. Too quiet. His COO watched him closely during their next meeting. There won't be a takeover, Ethan interrupted, because I'm not giving her the satisfaction. 2 days later, Ethan received an envelope delivered by hand. Dinner. Neutral ground. Just us. Ava. The location was a private dining room at the top of the St. Regis. That evening, he arrived at the St. Regis to find Ava already seated at a candlelit table by the window, the skyline sprawling behind her. Let's talk about the price of your piece. The St. Regis dining room was nearly empty, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a living painting. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers, the low light glinting off polished silverware. Ava sat poised, hands resting lightly on the table, a vision of calm control. Ethan approached, his jaw tight, but his expression neutral. I wanted privacy, Ava replied. And clarity. A waiter appeared with a bottle of wine, but neither of them touched it. This was not a dinner for indulgence. It was a negotiation. Ethan leaned forward. If you're here to gloat, save it. I'm still in control of cross dynamics. For now, Ava said evenly. But every day you lose more ground. Your board is fractured. Your investors are looking elsewhere, and you know I have the resources to wait you out. You always did like the long game. I learned from the best, she said, her tone soft but edged with steel. Ava slid a folder across the table. I'm offering you a way out, she said. You walk away with enough to start over quietly. This is generous, he said finally. Too generous, which means you want something more. What I want, Ava said, is to end this on my terms, not drag it through court and the press. I think, Ava said slowly, you've already sold it. To the media, to your ego, to anyone who believed your story about trading up for a model and leaving your powerless, pregnant wife behind. Ava's eyes locked onto his. It's always been about the marriage. You just didn't realize it was also about the business. He glanced toward the window, the city lights flickering like distant fires. I built Cross Dynamics, he said quietly. From nothing. Every deal, every product on patent Sinclair Technologies owns, Ava interrupted. On a network my family helped you access. You didn't build it alone, Ethan. You just convinced yourself you did. And what if I don't sign? Ava's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the space between them. Then I keep tightening the noose. Silence settled between them. You think you've cornered me? Ethan said. But there's one thing you're forgetting. I still have allies, and not all of them play by your family's rules. Which allies? Ava asked, tilting her head. The ones who already called me this week? Or the ones who've been selling their shares before the next quarter's report? He blinked. The slightest pause revealed the truth. What's this really about, Ava? Revenge? Proving you're stronger than me? Her expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with certainty. For the first time, his eyes dropped to her midsection, to the subtle curve beneath the tailored dress. Something unreadable crossed his face. After that, the offer disappears, and so does your control. You're underestimating me. Back at the Sinclair estate later that night, Ava found Richard waiting in her study. "Well?" he asked. "He's stalling," Ava said, sinking into her chair. "He's not ready to admit he's lost." Richard handed her a folder of his own. In his penthouse, Ethan poured himself a drink and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "It's Ethan," he said when the line picked up. "I need a favor." "Something off the books?" The voice on the other end chuckled. "Sounds like trouble." 2 nights later, Ava's head of security entered her office with a grim expression. The photo lay on Ava's desk like a warning. Ethan lurking in the background of her St. Regis meeting wasn't a coincidence. Richard paced in front of her. "Security, yes. But I'm not hiding. If he wants to watch me, I'll give him a performance worth remembering." Ethan's name appeared on the panel list 2 days before the event, added at the insistence of one of the sponsors. It was obvious he wanted to share the stage, maybe even publicly challenge her. The morning of the panel, Ava's PR head briefed her in the green room. "And if I push him far enough, the board will see him for exactly what he is." The panel began under bright stage lights. Cameras panned over the audience, CEOs, investors, reporters before settling on the lineup of speakers, Ava in a sleek navy dress, Ethan in a sharp charcoal suit. The moderator opened with broad questions about innovation and market trends. It was corporate philosophy dressed up as bravado. Midway through, the moderator asked, "What do you think is the biggest threat to innovation in this space?" Ava smiled slightly. "The real threat isn't competition. It's arrogance. Leaders who believe they're untouchable stop listening, stop adapting. And when they stop adapting, they lose." The crowd reacted with a low murmur. Ethan's jaw flexed, his eyes narrowing. Toward the end, the moderator asked about future projects. Ava leaned in. "Sinclair Technologies is preparing to launch a platform that will integrate predictive analytics into global logistics. Every sector." The moderator tried to pivot, but Ethan's voice cut through. The audience shifted uncomfortably. She met his gaze, calm and unflinching. In the green room afterward, reporters crowded Ava with questions. She answered selectively, keeping the focus on her projects. Ethan was across the room, speaking in hushed tones to his COO. That night, Ethan confronted his COO. "If he pushes this through, he'll burn through his cash reserves in 6 months." Ava's smile was cold. That afternoon, Ava received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single page torn from a legal pad. The city's winter charity gala was the kind of event that made front-page headlines and filled glossy magazine spreads. She wore a white satin gown with a cape that trailed behind her like fresh snow. Diamonds glimmered at her throat and wrists, and a single pearl pin, her mother's, anchored her sleek chignon. Tonight wasn't just about charity. It was about closure. Guests sipped champagne, exchanging pleasantries under towering floral arrangements. He was dressed in midnight blue, polished and smiling for the cameras. But the moment he saw Ava across the room, his smile faltered just enough for the photographers to catch it. "Our allies are here. 3 more board members confirmed they'll vote with us if it comes to it." Ava glanced toward Ethan, who was shaking hands with a venture capitalist she'd already secured on her side. The evening schedule called for speeches, a live auction, and a closing toast. Ava knew exactly where she would make her move. Ava let him push the number higher and higher, her expression unreadable. When the price reached a staggering figure, she lifted her paddle and doubled it. Ethan's jaw tightened. She stepped to the microphone, her voice carrying with effortless authority. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room before settling briefly, pointedly, on Ethan. "The future belongs to those who put purpose above ego, and that is how I will continue to lead in every arena." The applause was immediate, the message unmistakable. You really think this little performance will push me out? Ava smiled faintly. You already did, she said, turning away. We have the votes. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Ethan will be asked to resign. Ava exhaled slowly. It was happening. After months of strategic moves, careful pressure, and public victories, the endgame was here. The next day, in Cross Dynamics' glass-walled boardroom, the atmosphere was heavy. The special resolution passed with a decisive majority. Ethan's resignation was immediate. Cameras swarmed, but he kept his head down. Weeks later, the press announced the official merger of Cross Dynamics into Sinclair Technologies. With Ava at the helm of the combined operations, share prices surged. A few months later, Ava stood in a quiet, sunlit nursery, the scent of fresh paint still in the air. Richard entered, a soft smile on his face. No, she said, her voice filled with a peaceful certainty. Maybe it's the quiet strength she carried. It's about learning to stand tall in the middle of them. Ava's story shows exactly that. She couldn't control Ethan's betrayal, the rumors, or the corporate games, but she could control her choices, her dignity, and her comeback. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Ava reacted not with bitterness, but with strategy, courage, and purpose. And maybe you're facing your own Ethan right now, a person, a challenge, a season of loss. The pain you feel today can be the fuel for the life you build tomorrow. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that strength can be quiet, graceful, and unstoppable, then I invite you to keep walking this path with us. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own power, and feel free to subscribe so you never miss the next journey we take together.